Oh my God, why are piles of knits always heavier than they feel like they should be?
So my grand total spending on knitting this year was... Hi, hello, my name is Allie. I'm an independent graphic designer coming to you from just outside Toronto, and this is my channel where I talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it's costing me. And today we're talking about everything that I've knit this year. How I feel about it now, how much I actually wear it, and what it cost me all together for the whole year. First, as usual, I want to tell you about my mug and tea of the day. So today's mug is a new one in my collection because I recently went to the One of a Kind show in Toronto, and if I come back from that show without a new mug, something's wrong. Anyway, there was a new seller there this year called Imp in a Sweater, and first of all, I noticed her immediately because what was she wearing but the heirloom quilt cardigan? So basically, instead of saying hi, I said, oh my God, did you knit that? So we had a good chat about the heirloom quilt cardigan because, as you will have seen if you saw my winter knitting plans, that's one that's been percolating in my head for a really long time. But anyway, she made this gorgeous, gorgeous mug with this pretty flower on this side, another cute flower on this side. There's also one at the bottom. Can't show you that currently, but you can sort of see the very cute chartreuse inside that I may or may not have dressed to match today. And I was so torn at her booth because I couldn't decide between this one or she had a mug that was like a fiber arts mug. It had like a hank of yarn on it. It had circular needles. It had a crochet hook. It had scissors. It was so adorable. But I was just really attached to the shape of this mug and the color inside of it in particular, and also the motif. It was just kind of the right perfect combination of mug characteristics for me in the way that the other one didn't quite check all my boxes. But I wanted it to so badly because of the knitting theme. So I spent like an embarrassing amount of time standing at her booth, like picking up one, putting it down, picking up the other, putting it down, rinse, repeat, like just, it was bad. But we did make a decision eventually. But if you are in the market for a fiber arts themed mug, highly recommend giving her a follow. And out of this, I'm drinking my usual favorite Sloan Classic Earl Grey. This is also when I would usually tell you about what I'm wearing today, but since what I'm wearing today is one of the things that I knit this year, we're gonna pass on it for a second until it's turned in the lineup. So this year for 2025, I have 10 finished objects to show you, which actually is the exact same number as last year. So apparently I'm very consistent in the volume that I knit. Interesting to note. And so for each of those items, I'm going to try them all on. I will tell you what it is, who the designer is, what the size range is, what I knit it out of, what my cast on and cast off dates were, my total project cost, how many times I have worn it, and from that, the calculation of my cost per wear on that item so far, which is something that I like to keep track of. I sometimes get people asking me, why do you bother calculating the cost per wear? Like, aren't you knitting like for fun? What does it matter? And 100% totally. Like, I am not looking for every item that I knit to become my like absolute most efficient, lowest cost per wear item in my wardrobe. If that were my main goal, knitting's just not the most effective way to accomplish that. But it's a metric that I find just kind of fun and interesting to keep track of. And I just like having information. I'm a nerd. I like data. And I just find it interesting to learn over time what are the things that I'm gonna wear a lot, what are the things that I'm gonna wear less, and that can inform my future choices, not in a way where I would avoid knitting something that I really love and am passionate about knitting, but just so that I can go into it with my eyes wide open, being like, this is a thing that is probably not going to get a lot of wear, and it's probably going to cost me this amount of money, and is that worth it to me when I'm trying to decide between the gajillion gorgeous knitting patterns out in the world that I, only have so much time on this planet to spend knitting them, and it just helps me make those choices with a little bit more information, and mostly it's just fun for me. First though, before we dive in, I want to tell you about the sponsor for today's video, Craftsy. Craftsy is an online community of creative, like-minded makers where members can find endless inspiration, advance their skills, or discover their new favorite hobby. It could be knitting, crochet, sewing, baking, drawing. Whether you're new or have years of experience, Craftsy has something for everybody. I have complained here so many times about my struggles with variegated yarn, how hard I find it to look at a skein of gorgeous hand-dyed yarn that looks so beautiful, wind up in a hank, and to understand what that's actually going to look like knit up. So when I was browsing Craftsy's library and I saw Jill Draper's class, Mastering Multicolor Yarns, oh my God, I clicked on it so fast. She actually demonstrates how the exact same yarn behaves differently at different stitch counts, in different stitch patterns, in different garment constructions even, and how you can use that information to manipulate it, to show off the yarn the way that you want to, including just like asking the person at the yarn store to help you open up the hank so that you can see the length of the repeat. You can do that. I didn't know you could do that. I mean, probably not super well advised at like a busy fiber festival, but if your local yarn shop has someone available who's free to help you, it does not hurt to ask. And oh my God, you have so much more information once you see that opened up and you can see what the repeat actually looks like. It was so interesting. So like, I'm not suddenly a huge variegateds girl now, but I do feel like the next time I fall against my better judgment for a skein of variegated yarn, I feel like I understand so much better now what my options are to show off the yarn to its best according to my tastes. Anyway, it all kind of blew my mind. So if you want to give Craftsy a try, the first 1,000 people watching this video to use the link in my description will get a full year of premium membership to Craftsy for only $1.49. Thanks so much to Craftsy for sponsoring this video. All right, my first finished object of the year is my Lyon Sweater by Petite Knit. So let me get up and show you. Ta-da! This one is really nice and oversized. I think this is my most oversized sweater that I've knit to date. So it's really nice and cozy. It's just kind of easier to throw on over top of things than a lot of my other sweaters that are a bit more fitted. This was also my first time doing what I believe is called a European shoulder construction. It has this really neat line along the back of the shoulder. Let me see if I can show you. I just found it a really satisfying way to construct a sweater, and I really liked how the details came together. I felt like when I was doing it, I kind of had no idea what I was doing or what it was like accomplishing. And then when it was done, it looked amazing. And I was like, oh, who knew I knew how to do this so professionally? So I just found this pattern super satisfying to knit up in that way. And also the stripes of it all. Like, they are just addicting. So this is the Lyon Sweater by Petite Knit. This accommodates busts from 31.5 to 59 inches. And I cast this on January 1st. So this is a real new year, new knits, clean slate starting right on New Year's Day. And I was working on this until February 15th, which I felt like this came together really quickly. This was such a smooth process. I feel like I have never had so few things go awry in a knitting project, which might be in part because I really wasn't going off the rails with this one in the way that I so often am. I think that I was knitting with the recommended yarn, or at least something close to it. I didn't have weird gaugy things going on, and I just followed instructions. Who knew how simple and peaceful knitting can be when you do that? I wouldn't know, I don't do it a lot. So speaking of yarn, I knit this out of the Knitting for Olive Merino in the colorways Blood Orange and Poppy Rose. And there actually was a little bit of a mishap at this very first part of the project, because I had it in my head that I wanted to do this sort of like orangey red with a pink stripe situation. I was inspired by a sweater that Sarah Lily Makes had made that was more of like a cherry red and a light pink, and I loved it so much. I just wanted to put a little bit of a twist on it, doing it with more of a warm red. And I mean, this ended up pulling more explicitly orange than I originally imagined, but I love how it turned out. But when I was first ordering yarn, I initially ordered a different color pink. I think it was the one that was in stock. But when my yarn order arrived, I realized that, oh, I kind of miscalculated what shade this pink needed to be. Because the one that I got first, beside the orange, it was just like the orange being off the red would have been okay, is okay in the finished object against the right pink. But paired with this dusty rosy color, it just took it too far away for me from the original vision. It felt so kind of earthy and sort of retro in a way that was not at all what I was looking to do. So luckily I was able to return that colorway and swapped it out for Poppy Rose, and everything was much smoother sailing from there. This project cost me $90 Canadian, but that is in large part because I had $100 Canadian in gift cards that paid for like half the yarn for the project. So it would have been a bit more expensive, but for me, out of pocket, this one was only $90. And since I finished it, I've worn it 22 times, which feels like a pretty good number. Again, like I said, this is a pretty easy one to throw on over stuff, so it's a good layer to bring along with me if I think I might get cold. And that puts our current cost per wear, again, because my project cost was lowered by the gift card, to $4.09 Canadian, which is way lower than most of my sweater projects are this early in their shelf life. So this one is doing a great job. Based on the fit of this one feels to me more like a casual sweater. I put this on sort of the way that I would put on like a sweatshirt. It operates more in that category of my wardrobe, as opposed to some of my other knits that feel a bit more like, you know, I'm putting together like an outfit. I'm like trying to look nice and put something together. This exists in the more casual sphere of my wardrobe most of the time, which I think also contributes to it having a pretty decent wear count for being new to my wardrobe this year, because when you toss things on casually, you toss them on a lot. Okay, these earrings were a real choice for a video where I'm gonna have to get changed a million times. All right, the second thing that I finished this year is what I'm wearing. This is my Colette Pullover by Sari Nordland. We'll get rid of the scarf so you can actually see it a little bit better. So here it is in all of its glory. It's slightly short-sleeved glory. This was a case where I had a little bit of a yarn chicken situation. The yarn that I knitted out of was not available to get more of by the time that I was actually finishing up this project. This was one that sat in my stash for a while. This to me is like a cautionary tale of why I don't enjoy having yarn sitting in my stash, because who knows, by the time I actually use it, my options might be a little limited as they were here. I mean, the good news is that as a taller than average girl, I have a lifetime of practice wearing my sweaters with the sleeves rolled up at all times. So that's not really a functional issue for me. I do generally like one of the features of my knitting to be the fact that my sleeves can be long enough, but we win some, we lose some. And in this case, I lost some to yarn chicken. But other than that, I love this sweater. It's just glorious. Let me come sit down and tell you more about it. So like I said, this is the Colette Pullover by Sari Nordland. This pattern accommodates busts measuring from 27.75 to 61.75 inches. And I was knitting this from February 15th, so literally the same day I finished the Lyon. Apparently I didn't have a whole lot going on that day. We finished one project, we start another, and this one wrapped up March 19th. So that was a pretty quick process for me. I just said that about the Lyon too. I guess I feel like I have gotten faster at knitting this year than in previous years, but then again, we've established I knit the same number of things this year as last year, so I don't know. I don't really know how that's shaken out, but it just feels like, I would have expected that to take more time. Granted, this one did fall over a period of time where I was also on a trip. I was on vacation, which I honestly don't know if I feel like I knit more on vacation or in normal life, because yes, on the one hand, on vacation, I have the free time of not working, but usually if I'm on a vacation, like it's usually not a vacation, like a lounging, it's usually like a trip. Like I tend to be walking like 30,000 steps a day. Like it's not casual, but also sometimes it means there's like a lot of time on a plane or a train or, you know, various automobiles. So I don't know. I'm not sure if that contributed to this getting done sooner perhaps than it would have under other circumstances, but nevertheless, I feel like that's not bad considering the kind of all over texture situation going on here, right? I feel like that always takes a little bit longer, though my favorite thing about this pattern, other than just how beautiful it looks, is how low effort these cables are. Because like, if you look at them, they're very tall cables. There's a large amount of space between the twists, which means that you don't actually have to do the twisting very often. Most of the time, you're just knitting the cables essentially as a rib, right? You have your columns of knits with a few purls in between, and that's mostly all you're doing like 99% of the time in this pattern. And then just once in a while, you do a little cable twist and everything looks magical. So I highly recommend this pattern if you love the look of cables, but you just find them kind of tedious and don't generally super enjoy the process. If you want to dip your toe into cable knitting, I think this is the perfect pattern for that. So in terms of the yarn, the aforementioned yarn chicken, I knit this out of the cotton lino from the Wandering Flock in the colorway Citrine, and that is in fact the one that I ran out of. I ordered it when I think I sort of first released cotton lino, and it was available for a limited time. They have since eventually brought it back, but for many, many months, including when I was working on this, it was nowhere to be found. And this is one that went a little bit awry because, so actually when I say I cast this on February 15th, I recast this on February 15th. I actually started it before my Lyon, and I tabled it and picked up my Lyon in like a fit of rage instead, because, not a fit of rage, but I had started the back panel and I was just feeling like I do not like how this fabric looks. I'm trying to approximate the gauge of a designer who, while brilliant, knits nothing like me, and me trying to get my gauge to match hers by only upsizing my needles is resulting in a fabric that looks like hot garbage. In my opinion, it was so open. And I also realized that just the cotton lino, I kind of gotten it into my head that it was like firmly a DK weight yarn, when in fact the description, it said something about like, it's a sport weight yarn, but it's sort of like in the middle and, you know, can sort of stretch to be used as like up to a DK. And I really just read that and saw DK because I wanted to, because I wanted to make this pattern with it, and I hadn't really processed the fact that as a perpetually tight knitter, I'm never going to be stretching the gauge of a yarn in that direction, right? Like if anything, like I could probably use an Aran weight as a worsted weight, no problem. So sport to DK, especially trying to match Sari's gauge was super not working for me. Realized, okay, I need to go back to the drawing board, or in this case, the yarn store. I took my back panel that I'd started to the knitting loft, and I was walking around looking for something, anything that I could hold with this yarn that would maintain the vision that I had for it, because I bought this yarn, I bought the cotton lino in citrine because I was obsessed with the color. I just love a chartreuse, and specifically, like, I love a cuspy color. I love the kind of color that makes us all argue about what it is. Like, to me, this is a green. This is like the most yellowy that a green can be while still being green. Meanwhile, many of you will be in the comments telling me it's yellow, right? I love that kind of color. So in looking for something to hold with it, I was really trying to find something that wouldn't tip the balance of the color one way or the other. And this kind of forced me to take the sweater in a slightly different direction than I'd planned, because with the cotton lino, this is a cotton linen, and I believe silk. I think there's silk mixed in it too, but a largely plant fiber blend. I was thinking, oh, it'll finally be my first like lighter weight, kind of like throw it on in the summer kind of sweater. And I just simply could not find anything in the plant fiber or silk category that I could hold with this that had the kind of fidelity to the color that I was looking for. So instead, what ended up happening is it became a mohair sweater, a quite toasty sweater, and a much more expensive sweater than I had planned on this project being, because I ended up adding the Wandering Flock silk mohair also in the colorway citrine, because of course that was the best color match. I did find a couple of other mohair options that were a little bit cheaper, but the color again wasn't nearly as good of a match, and they weren't really significantly cheaper. So I was kind of like, if we're gonna do this, if I'm already going to almost double what was my intended original project cost by having to buy all this new yarn, I don't want to also feel like, I wish it was the original color. Wish it hadn't gotten ruined. So this was a real like in for a penny, in for a pound, or sunk cost fallacy kind of situation, depending on whether you're a glass half empty or a glass half full kind of person. Personally, I'm going to choose to look at it that I was in for a penny, in for a pound. And as for exactly how many pennies and pounds, including the yarn, pattern costs, the duty that I paid to get the original cotton lino in Canada, all of it all together cost me $348 Canadian, which it's literally twice what I thought this project was going to be. However, honestly, I think this is my favorite thing that I knit all year. So do I wish that it wasn't that expensive? Yes. Would I do it any differently if it came up tomorrow? No, I would not. So since I finished this, I have worn it 13 times. I'm also planning to pack it for my trip that I have coming up. It's not 100% that it's gonna make it in, because I've made my aspirational list of what I wish to bring, but I have yet to actually finish playing suitcase Tetris to determine how much I can actually fit. So I may have to do a bit of negotiating with myself. Sweaters may or may not get cut, but this is one that I'm hoping to take with me, which I think also indicates a high level of I really like it and I find it functional. Like operating in a small like capsule wardrobe kind of situation for a trip, I still really, really want to fit it in. So that's a really good sign, I think. It should soon get a few more wears on the trip alone. And so our total project cost divided by 13 wears puts our current cost per wear at $26.76. Also, this is my I'd be wearing something I knit if it wasn't so hot out shirt. So if it is not in fact sweater weather where you are and you would like one of those, you can find these in my Etsy shop. All right, my next finished object for 2025 is my Tucker by Alicia Plummer. So this is my one and only fingering weight long sleeve knit. And really what I've learned from that is that I would like to have a lot more of these, and also I have yet to convince myself to knit another one of them. But it's just like nice and cozy and easy to wear. It's very lightweight. It's fingering weight in a way that, you know, I love wearing all of my mini sweaters in the depths of winter, but what about the rest of the year? So this is one that I found to be a very useful weight. It's just cozy. It affords a lot of the cozy comfort that my other knits do, without having to play the game of like, I wake up and I'm like, oh, is it cold enough that I can wear a sweater today? I think it's a sweater day. And then I put on the sweater and then like 2 hours later, I'm like dripping sweat. And I'm like, okay, I don't think it was a sweater day. I think we have to get changed. Like, this kind of avoids that while still giving me comfy, cozy, I'm wearing a sweater that I knit feelings. And it's also one with a really cute fade situation going on. So no complaints. So the Tucker by Alicia Plummer is a pattern that accommodates busts measuring from 28 to 74 inches. And I cast this on March 20th. So day after I finished my Colette, this was on the needles. And I finished it April 30th, which is kind of shocking to me to look back at because in my head, this took me like 3.5 months. Like I had this wonderful idea of I wanted to do this fade because, again, Sarah Lily Makes, apparently she's very influential on me. She made this beautiful fade between the same colorways, but at, I think, a DK weight. And I was just so compelled by it and I wanted to do it, but decided to do it at fingering weight. Thought I was like saving myself some money. I was like, okay, this is like expensive indie dyed variegated yarn. Like, I'll do fingering weight instead of DK weight and I can do this pattern, it'll be more practical, blah, 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 blah. But not that I didn't realize that the fade would operate differently in doing it that way. Like, I knew that I wouldn't be able to do it the way that you can with DK, where it's just like you hold 2 strands of one and then you hold 1 strand of each and then you hold 2 strands of the other. You can't fade that way when you're only knitting with 1 strand. So I knew I would have to be doing like micro striping to do the fade. That was fine. It was fine until I had to do it and learned, oh, I hate micro striping, which I was surprised by. I was unprepared to hate this because I really enjoyed knitting. Like, my Sailor Swift that I made last year is stripes, and they're not huge stripes, but I have learned that the difference between like small stripes and tiny single row stripes, those are not remotely the same thing to me. And in large part it was in the sleeves that I had this issue. So granted, I never did striped sleeves on my Sailor Swift. I did do striped sleeves on my Lyon, but the stripes are much thicker there. And to be honest with you though, I don't think I loved it there. I think I just find striping with magic loop really fiddly and kind of tricky to try to get the center to look nice, and feels like I can spend a lot of energy trying to do that and not really seeing the result. It always seems to still end up looking kind of mucky to me. I don't usually have issues with guttering in Magic Loop, but if I'm striping, I really seem to. And so with this one, it was so bad that I actually have like a mattress stitch seam up the inside. I was like, I simply can't leave it this way. So my sleeves that were knit in the round ended up being mattress stitched anyway, just to hide that. So, I mean, problem solved. It just meant that it wasn't my favorite knitting experience of all time. But again, I just really like having a knit that is this weight. I love the little pocket, even if it did take me several hours to not to knit the square so much as just to figure out like, okay, exactly where is it going to be positioned? What is the fade stripe pattern doing in that location? How do I get it to match that precisely? So that took a very long time, but it is very cute and I am very satisfied with it. So when I decided I was gonna make this, I placed an order from Hedgehog Fibers for their Oh So Fine Merino in the colorways Foam and Down by the River, because again, that's what our influencer, Sarah Lily Makes, had used for hers. And I was looking at the Tucker pattern and I was like, okay, with these yardages, I think with one of each, I think I should be just okay with 1 skein of each. I think I should be fine. I'm at like the lowest end. If I like knit the small size that I think I'm gonna knit, I should be okay. It might be a tiny bit yarn chickeny, but like should totally be within like a reasonable realm. And then I went to cast on the project and I actually purchased the pattern and I looked more closely and realized that the yardage that I had based that order off of was for the t-shirt version of the pattern, which was not in fact what I was planning to knit, meaning that I absolutely did not have enough yardage using only those 2 skeins, which then put me in a weird spot because I was like, okay, first of all, if I place another order from Hedgehog Fibers, I don't want to pay duty again, especially because it would be a second order. And when you're charged duties, so much of what you pay isn't even like the actual tax. It's like brokerage and handling fees. So like if it had just all been in one order, the total duty and other associated costs would have been less than if I were to now order a second one. So that felt a bit like insult to injury. But also, what is the correct answer here? It was kind of like, do I now have to order another skein of each? Because I really wanted this to be like a 50-50 kind of thing. If I order just another skein of one of them, which one do I want there to be more of? And it was just kind of like, there just didn't seem to be like a good option. So then I kind of started thinking, okay, what other like more outside the box options do we have? And so that's when I went looking for a third color that this could transition into that I could access a little bit more easily, which is how I ended up using a yarn from La Bien-Aimée to finish this off. So this is the Twist Nouveau base in the colorway High Tower, and I used that to transition the Down by the Bay into, just to get that last bit of length. The end result ended up being kind of different than my original vision because it does bring like more darkness to the overall thing. I was originally imagining that it would be more overall pastel in color, and this definitely is a little bit richer than that. So not quite the original vision, but I think it's cute, it's cozy, I like it. Do I want to knit it again? No, not with the micro stripes. I do think I would like to knit another fingering weight knit though, just not as a fade. In terms of cost, like my Colette, this is one that spiraled a little bit because again, initially I thought I only needed those 2 skeins. So originally this project would have cost me $150 Canadian. I was like, okay, that feels reasonable. And then I had to buy the third color, which again, it's also like a small indie dyer variegated thing because it needed to kind of match the overall look of the other ones, right? So that brought the total project cost to 206 Canadian dollars. And since I finished this, I've worn it 12 times, which puts our current cost per wear at $17.16. And like my Lyon, this is kind of one that I'm much more likely to throw on kind of in casual settings. This is one that I also I liked the idea of it more than I think it actually truly fits into my personal style. I think it was more like, ooh, pastel gradient, pretty driven, and less like, do pastel gradients really form a significant part of my wardrobe? No, I mean, prior to this existing, they formed 0% of my wardrobe. So it's kind of out of nowhere in my wardrobe. It's a little bit out of place. So I definitely think of it more as like a loungewear category sort of thing. But I also really enjoyed bringing this with me this summer. Anytime I was like visiting somebody's cottage, something like that, it just is a good, like, you know, when you're like changing out of your swimsuit for the day and you want to get into something cozy, but not something that you're going to overheat in because it is in fact still July. It was really good for that kind of scenario. Now, my next knit of 2025 is my Serendipity by Knitting for Breakfast. So this was my first ever stranded colorwork, and I was obsessed. It's also still my only stranded colorwork to date, in part because I found it so obsessive to work on that like it really took over my life. Like I feel like I can only take on stranded colorwork at times when I can afford for it to take over my life because all I wanted to do was work on this. It was literally like, when am I done work? Can I be done now? Can I go work on that sweater, please? Thank you. I have never been so, I keep coming back to the word obsessed, just obsessed with the idea of getting back to my knitting. So I had an absolute blast working on this. I did modify this pattern a little bit to make it cropped and to add a split hem. I was kind of thinking, this is another reason I think that I haven't just been knitting a million colorwork sweaters since this one, is there is a little bit of tension in a similar way that I was saying the Tucker, like I love the idea of it, but like, does it actually fit into my personal style super well? Not really. I kind of have a similar issue with a lot of stranded colorwork where I think it's so gorgeous and I find it so much fun to knit, but it just doesn't feel like the most natural fit to my style a lot of the time. So I was kind of trying to make a few tweaks to this that would make it feel a little bit more natural to me to wear. So that was my thinking in making some of those changes. And this one I'm also really, really happy with how it turned out because I feel like I took a little bit of a gamble on the colorwork yoke in using a variegated yarn for one of my contrast colors. I had this yarn, I was really obsessed with it. Again, speaking of variegated yarns and not knowing what they're gonna do, how to use them, how it's gonna go, I had been obsessed with this yarn for a while before I came up with an actual use case for it. And I kind of thought this use case was a bit of a risk. I was not confident how it was gonna go, despite, you know, all my best efforts making mock-ups. I have a whole video about how I do mock-ups to try to plan my future knits, but even with that, I was like, I just don't exactly know how this variegated yarn is gonna go. So I could not be happier with how it worked out because I feel like it looks so good, if you don't mind me saying. So to back up a little bit, again, this is the Serendipity by Knitting for Breakfast. This pattern accommodates busts from 24 to 66 inches. And when I say that I was obsessed with this one, I am not joking. This was on the needles from May 3rd to May 26th, which for me is like unprecedented speed for a sweater. Like, never have I knit something so fast, because I just simply couldn't bring myself to be doing anything else. To the point where like, this is the only project where I can actually point you to like a video that you can go watch to see everything about this project start to finish, because all of my other projects were sort of spread across multiple videos and giving updates in each one, right? Because they're spread across a period of time. But on my channel, where I post every other week, I had a whole video that was just about this sweater from start to finish, because it was so fast. And in terms of these yarns I was talking about, this was kind of a funny one. A lot of planning and thinking and yarn pondering went into this before it was cast on. Like, I was trying to plan my first stranded colorwork sweater a billion years before it was actually cast on. Like, I spent so much more time planning than knitting, because I picked up my main color for this in October, and again, didn't cast this on until May. And I bought this yarn with the intent that it would be the main color in a colorwork sweater. And I was kind of, I mean, not actively 24/7, obviously, but like passively that whole time since October, trying to come up with what I wanted to do with it, what colors I would use it with, and it took me until May. So this main color is from Shelterwood Fiber Co. It's a DK weight 100% Romney wool base in natural dark brown. It says like gray is like struck out on the label, like natural dark gray scratch out brown, which feels appropriate because it really is a very in-between color. It is a very cool toned brown or a very, very warm gray, which is really what I liked about it. I found this in the yarn shop Bad Anna's in Vancouver when I was visiting there, so it was kind of my souvenir yarn, and I got enough skeins for it to be the main color in a colorwork sweater, not enough for it to be its own whole sweater, which is part of why it became such a saga to figure out what to use with it, because as I came to find when I was trying to just look at different contrast color options, something about like the gray brown of it all, I found it very hard to match with any particular color without it starting to feel weirdly dated. Like, something about this color mixed with almost every color felt weirdly like 70s. I don't know. I can't really explain it, but I didn't like how any of them looked. Like, I swear I tried like every color in the rainbow and they all felt weird to me for some reason. But then so again, kind of starting to think outside of the box a little, of like, I have to hold it with something. I don't have enough for it to just be a solid sweater. Around the same time, I had been very drawn to the La Bien-Aimée Inco colorway. In this way where, again, like, I don't know what to do with variegated yarn. I don't know what it's gonna do. I don't know what it's gonna look like. I don't know if I'm gonna like it. I don't know. But every time it would pop up online, I was just like, I like it. I just love every individual shade in this. And I love the way that they combine together. It just looks so good. And somewhere along the line, I was having these thoughts trying to figure out what colors I should pair with this base color. And then also over here were thoughts floating around about like, oh my god, that Inco colorway, I love it so much. What could I possibly do with it? Eventually, those ideas happened at the same time. And I went, wait a minute, would this work with this? And so this is when I started all of my many mock-ups. So the white/cream color is the colorway Winter from La Bien-Aimée. So it and the Inco are both on their Merino DK base. And I just love how they worked up in the yoke so much. Like, it just feels like total serendipity, if you will. How appropriate. The way that they disperse themselves so nicely. It actually dispersed less well on the back, but it's the back, so who cares? Serendipity. And also more mods that I did on this one. I also converted this chart from being a 4-color chart to just a 3-color chart. And I also modified the way that the sprinkles, as I like to call them, are used on the body and the sleeves. In the pattern, they're intended to look like more sort of a random dispersion that fades out, whereas I decided I wanted to just have like a classic equal distribution of them all the way down. And I did that with my Inco colorway because it just gives these cute little fun like rainbow flecks all over, which I think is super cute. So in terms of cost, this one was $227 Canadian, and I've worn this 4 times, which does not sound like a lot of times to have worn it since I finished it well over 6 months ago, but Like 2 weeks ago, I had worn it 0 times. I kind of realized just a colorwork yoke design like this just feels deeply wintry to me. Like wearing it in autumn does not appeal to me. It feels very like alpine après-ski. Like until there could be snow outside, it doesn't feel right to wear this sweater. But since that season has finally arrived, I've been wearing this quite a bit. So it just hasn't had a lot of time in its season yet. Its season has only just arrived. So that $227 project cost divided by 4 wears puts our current cost per wear at $56.75. But again, since that wear count is so low, that cost per wear is gonna come down quite dramatically each of the next few times that I wear it. Okay, my next knit of 2025 is the Lakes Cardigan by Ozetta. So here it is, my first ever cardigan that I knit that actually has buttons on it. So I've knit a couple of cardigans before, but they were always ones that I was like, this is just intended to be worn open, and also I'm scared of making button bands that actually have to function. So I'm just gonna not. And this was me finally confronting those fears and creating a button-up cardigan, which I think was actually a success. I was really concerned specifically about, you know how you sometimes see cardigans where the button band looks like it's really being like pulled by the buttons, and instead of a nice straight line, it's very like wobbly. I really hate that. And I felt like I really don't want to go to all the trouble of knitting a cardigan and then feel like it's been ruined by a wobbly button band. So I did a lot of research into what makes that happen and how can I make it not happen. And I'm super happy with how mine turned out. There's a bit of an imperfection on mine toward the bottom. That's actually an issue with the exact placement of my buttonholes. They're not totally even. Somehow I miscounted my rows. So I do have to kind of like zhuzh that a little bit if I want it to sit perfectly. But otherwise, if we don't look at the very bottom, I think that looks like a pretty perfect button band, don't you? So I was very satisfied with that result. And if you also are scared of this issue, from what I found, the real issue here is the idea of buttons needing a shank on them to create room for the button band to exist in. So just search for Roxanne Richardson's video about button shanks and you'll be good to go. So the Lakes Cardigan by Ozetta accommodates busts measuring from 28 to 60 inches. And you can see this is definitely like a wide set shoulder kind of design. Like it definitely can have a tendency to sort of start to fall off the shoulder a little bit, but I like it. I think it feels like kind of just part of the style and the design of it, but just know that like if that's something that's gonna drive you up the wall, just know that maybe it's something you want to modify. So I cast this on May 23rd and I wrapped it up July 16th, which is one of the longer time spans of any of the knits we've seen so far this year, which is very odd to me because this is a pretty thick knit, right? So I knit this out of the Nora Madara in the colorway Sake, which is the yarn that is written in the pattern. It's also suggested to hold it with a mohair, which I did not do because Nora Madara, like it's very expensive on its own. And I was like, I don't want to be paying for this expensive yarn and then hold it with a mohair that's going to kind of hide some of the detail of like all of these fun little color flecks that are what make this yarn special. I was like, I just want to let that shine on its own. I know some people have expressed concerns that like part of the reason that you hold it with a mohair is that it helps give it some structural integrity because this is not like a tightly spun yarn at all. But I mean, knock on wood, I haven't had any issues with it yet. And as we'll see in a minute, I have worn this quite a bit. So I don't regret that choice yet. But anyway, it's not a fine gauge, and yet this took me so much longer than some of my things that were at a finer gauge. And I think it just came down to the construction of this one. There was a lot of like, pause this and pick up stitches here, and then pick up stitches over there, and pick up stitches here, there, and everywhere, and do short rows here and there. And it was just much more like all over the place, very like having to be glued to instructions than I ever would have expected something that looked like this to be. I really thought this one was going to be more smooth sailing. So I think that one delayed this project quite a bit because there were just days where like, well, you know, I have like half an hour, 45 minutes to knit today. But if that knitting means I have to like sit down and like read instructions closely and like figure something out, I'll probably just wait until I have a longer session where I can get that done and then like enjoy continuing to knit on it. So I think I just had more like non-knitting days while I was working on this one. So since Nora Madara Sake is not an inexpensive yarn, adding in the pattern cost and also the cost of the buttons, which I will put a link in the description to the Etsy shop that I got these from. They had a nice selection. I think these are super pretty, nice tortoiseshell buttons. The total project cost came out to $345 Canadian, so like just squeaking under the $350 that is for some reason a weird boundary in my brain where like I can convince myself that it wasn't like entirely irresponsible. And since I finished it, I've worn it 21 times at least, because this is one where, because it's a cardigan, I am likely to just like grab this and throw this on and then take it off again and on and off and all throughout the days and weeks and everything. So I don't think that I always reliably track this one when I end up putting it on, just because it's not always part of my outfit as I planned it for the day. But that means that worst case scenario, our $345 project cost divided by 21 wears equals $16.42 Canadian. And I feel like that one is gonna work its way down really quickly over time, because this is just a very utilitarian cardigan, like especially for someone who likes to knit in a lot of bright colors. As you've seen, this was sort of how I tricked myself into knitting something neutral, because it does have fun colors if you look closely. So it just kind of goes with almost everything. Like I don't like to wear it with something that's super elaborate and patterned, but any color basically I can pair this with. So very useful, gets a lot of wear both around the house and as part of more of a planned outfit. My next knit of the year is my Ardent by Kindred Red, which is out of Pom Pom magazine. I love this one because it is so different than anything else that I've ever knit. A, it's not a sweater. B, it's not just like a tank top. It's like, I don't know. It's like, remember when we had like going out tops? I mean, we didn't. I was slightly too young for the first iteration of that sort of attire going to the club, but my sister, who's a little bit older than me, had many a going out top. So it's sort of but like not, I don't know where I'm going with this train of thought. Anyway, it's an interesting top. I like its little sleevey ruffle things. I like the split hem. I love the color blocking. This was one where I actually just straight up copied what the sample looked like for the pattern, which normally I'm out here like trying to use some like weird unexpected color on things. I just did exactly as prescribed here because I saw the picture and was like, I need it. I love it. I must have it. It's perfect. So the Ardent by Kindred Red accommodates busts from 28 to 62 inches. And I had this on the needles from July 11th to August 28th, which tracks for me because this is a finer gauge than most of the other things that I've been knitting this year. This is knit up at a sport weight, and it was a lot of fabric, especially these ruffles. So it took some time. I, again, just knit this exactly as prescribed in the sample. So I knit this out of Kelbourne Woolens Mojave in the colorways Bright Yellow and Natural. And between that and the pattern, that put my total project cost at $140 Canadian. This is a nice cotton linen blend that felt really nice to work on in the summer. You know, I didn't have a giant pile of wool on my lap. And it also was pretty nice and soft on my hands. It didn't bug me. I did really notice, though, the Bright Yellow felt much sort of softer, silkier in my hands. So I think however it's processed in order to dye it, that really softens it up compared to the natural. So if that's something that you have any concerns about, I would maybe stick with the dyed colors in this yarn, but was not an issue on my hands the way that I worried it might be. Sometimes you hear bad stuff about plant-based fibers, but didn't have an issue with this one. And this was just a really fun exercise in like, oh, I can make something really different using the same skill set. Like I think we think knitting and we think sweaters, but there are so many other things that we can make. And I don't mean just like, oh, you can make mittens too, or like a winter headband, but I mean like outside the realm of things designed to make us warm. You know, I think we often think of knitting as being like for winter, and even like crochet is maybe more for summer. You know, I think crochet, I think like music festival attire. And this was just a fun exercise for me in like, oh yeah, like knitting is so much more flexible than I sometimes give it credit for. There's such a range of things that you can knit, and this has, I was gonna say it's kind of pushed me to try to find more other different things I can knit. I don't really think that my winter knitting plans reflect that, but to be fair, it's winter. I want to knit nice winter cozy things in the winter. So next summer, we'll see, I guess, if I actually learned any lessons from this. But for now, I really love having this top in my wardrobe. It's definitely not like something I wear every day. I've only worn this 4 times, but because it's like a statement piece, you know, it's fun. It's like if I'm wearing this, it's like this is the basis of my outfit, and I don't want to overuse that. I want it to stay fun. So right now, the total project cost of $140 divided by 4 wears puts our current cost per wear at $35. Okay, my next knit of 2025 is actually my last garment of the year. I, for some reason, really deviated into like the small item category only at the very end. But this is my Rivendell by Sari Nordland. So this one I just finished pretty recently. So this one is the newest finished garment in my closet. It is So cozy because it's knit out of 100% baby alpaca. This is what I was calling my Peru sweater while I was both conceptualizing what I wanted it to be and while I was knitting it up, because I knit this out of the baby alpaca that I got on my trip to Peru earlier this year. So it was really fun for me to try to come up with the right use case for that and just think about what I would want to be my kind of like souvenir sweater from what was a really cool trip where I got to visit an alpaca farm. Like, the knitter in me was so happy there. There's so much incredible fiber art in Peru. So it was just an absolute delight there, like 24/7, you know, just being out for like a casual lunch and you're looking around at the incredible like woven designs on the back of the chairs that are so colorful, and it was just an absolute joy. So to be able to come home and make a sweater out of yarn that I got on that trip from the alpacas was very cool. So I ultimately chose the Rivendell by Sari Nordland. Love this pattern. I loved the big V-neck. It's so different of a cut than any of my other knits, right? It gives a whole different look. My only qualm about this one is the way that it tends to want to like sit up in the front and fall down in the back. I find myself having to do a little bit of like adjusting to get the V to sit where it's really supposed to, so that the shoulders are where they should be and so that the back isn't like so much longer than the front. Like I did deliberately do a split hem with a longer back, but not by like an 8-inch margin, you know? And that's where it can kind of want to fall back to sometimes. So that's not its like absolute number one shining quality, but its comfort level absolutely is. Also, the sleeves on this one are very generous, probably more so than they really have any business being, particularly since I knit the cuff quite tight, so it doesn't like naturally fall over my hand, which is for the best to keep them out of the way when I need them out of the way, but does kind of do like a mushroomy thing. I don't know. We will. Sometimes sleeves get shorter. I really kind of was worried that would happen here, so I was trying to be generous like I always am. And usually I find I'm generous on sleeves and they still end up being a little shy of what I would like them to be. This has not been the case so far this time, but I have been warned about the alpaca drape many times. So I do suspect they're going to stay this way and probably not shrink up. Maybe someday I will decide to shorten them. Highly unlikely that'll be anytime soon. It tends to take me a very long time to get around to doing this sort of thing, but maybe someday. So the Rivendell Pullover by Sari Nordland accommodates bust sizes from 29.75 to 61.25 inches. And I had this on the needles from September 4th to October 24th. And this one felt like a little bit of a slog toward the end. The all over moss stitch really kind of started to take its toll. Actually, sorry, it's seed stitch. Now working on moss stitch on my book club cardigan. Similar but different. I do find that these sort of all over texture stitch patterns do kind of noticeably add to how a project feels to work on for me, how long it feels like it's continuing on, but I do think like it was so worth it. Like, I love the texture of this. It feels very cozy. There's something very like fun and inviting to me about that kind of texture. So very happy with this one. Was also happy when it was done. So that 100% baby alpaca that I knit it out of was a DK weight that I got at Manos de la Comunidad, which is like an alpaca farm experience around the Cuzco region of Peru. And this project cost me a total of $250 Canadian. Now, I've only worn it 3 times so far, but I'm gonna cut it some slack because again, it's the newest thing in my finished wardrobe. It hasn't had a whole lot of time, but also around the holidays right now, I feel like this is really its chance to shine. So I give it a pass for now, but as it stands, its current cost per wear is $83.33. All right, the next finished object of 2025 is the Naruto hat that I knit for my nephew for Christmas. So for this one, I used as the basis for this hat the Musselburgh by Easel de Tigre when I was asking for recommendations for a reversible all over stockinette hat. Like, resounding, unanimous, not one single person told me to knit anything else. So it was clear that there was a winner here, and yeah, I get why people like this pattern so much. Granted, I have only knit half of it for reasons that are explained in my winter knitting plans video where I first talked about this as a finished object, but basically I just knit the first half twice and then Kitchenered them together. But the fit is so good. It has like some nice room up here to give you a little bit of like fun volume without it being like a weird point or being too bulky. It's not too close to the head. It's perfect. I've never knit a hat before, and I have just seen enough like awkward fitting hats in the world of knitting that I kind of figured that your first few are gonna be a bit of a write-off. Stunned, floored, shocked, surprised, thrilled to find that it looks like this. I'm so happy with it. I feel like when I at some point want to knit myself a hat, I just am gonna knit this same hat again, which I don't usually re-knit patterns, so that's a pretty glowing review coming from me. And yeah, it did the job well for this. It posed a few challenges with trying to do this portion on the brim. Obviously, this is not part of the Musselburgh pattern. This is the headband design of the guy in Naruto himself, I do believe. My nephew will be so unimpressed if I'm wrong about that. But anyway, so I created a colorwork chart to try to replicate the design on his headband, and I did intarsia in the round, following Franco's method, which I'll link his tutorial down below. It's extremely thorough. It takes a while to wrap your head around. It's a long tutorial for a reason. It did the job. Do I wish to do more intarsia in the round in my life? No, not really. But I also don't really know how I would have done this better. So the gray was intarsia, and then I duplicate stitched the black on top of it. So potentially, when I was trying to get a hang of it, I was like, okay, if this doesn't work, I think what I would need to do is just knit this portion of the hat flat and then seam it up the back. I think that would not be the end of the world, and that would have allowed me to work intarsia the normal way. So maybe I could have done that instead in a world where I run into this kind of situation again, but it was kind of a fun challenge to learn intarsia in the round. It works, and it's really cool that it works, but I think I would need to do so much more of it for it to ever become second nature. Franco also does say in his tutorial that he finds the smaller a circumference you're working in, actually, the harder it is to do, that it's much more clear and easy to just like see where you are and understand what's going on when you're working on something like a sweater. So I don't think I was making it particularly easy on myself doing it in the context of a hat for the first time, but it's fine, it's over. And the part that wasn't that flew. This went by so fast. It was a sport weight knit. I was a little bit concerned that it would feel like it took a really long time because I'm usually knitting at more of a DK weight, but I had a great time. Would definitely knit more Musselburghs, and I feel like it turned out so well. I'm so pleased with how recognizable I feel like the symbol turned out. I was a little bit afraid that it would get kind of like muddied and wouldn't be clear once it was kind of distilled down into basically like knit stitch pixel art, but I feel like it totally works. So this is the Musselburgh by Isolde Teague. This pattern has sizes from baby to adult XL, and I had this on the needles from October 26th to November 15th, but honestly, most of it was done in a much shorter time span. It really just kind of took me 2 weeks of like setting down the brim and coming back to it and trying again and restarting. It took me several tries, so most of it way quicker. If I'd been knitting a plain Musselburgh, this would have been done in like a week, which was shocking to me because like if you're not familiar with the Musselburgh, allow me to show you my terrible hat head and blow your mind, because like it's a giant Kinder Egg shape that you fold up inside itself. This is the fun variegated yarn that's hiding inside, that's just sort of like in the color scheme of the Naruto logo, so it's just sort of the like fun like stealth fan version of the hat. It doesn't feel like being in full logo mode at a given time, you know? But yeah, I was just shocked by how quickly this amount of fabric knit up. I think it was just the exact magical amount of stitches where like it was the absolute fewest number of stitches that could fit on my circular needle with its shortest cord and just be knitting a real round and not having to do magic loop. Like the fewest stitches possible without requiring magic loop, so the rounds went as quickly as they possibly could, was so fun. Just the pace of it, progress just flew. It was a great time. Why did I pull it all the way out? Because now I have to fix it. So in terms of materials, this is Sandnesgarn Sisu, which is their like sock yarn that's mostly merino with a bit of nylon in it, in the colorway 5937. And then the fun variegated color on the inside was the colorway Koi from Fergus Yarn Co., also in their sock base. And then this one I got to use a little bit of scrap yarn for. This whole motif is done with some leftover Cascade 220. The gray and the black are both things that were just kicking around in my stash in small amounts, and they were perfect for this. It was nice to not have to buy a whole ball just to do these little details with. So since I already had those and like those yarn costs were allocated to other projects long ago, I'm only counting the Sisu and the Fergus Yarn Co., which cost me a total of 75 Canadian dollars. And I can't give you any cost per wear numbers because it's not even Christmas yet. He has not even seen it. Oh my god, isn't it so cute? I'm so excited to give it to him. I hope that he likes it. I hope it's not like not cool, you know? I feel like with 10-year-olds, you never really know. This was my idea. He didn't request this. I just, like, his whole life is anime and he loves Naruto. So I was thinking like, maybe, hopefully, he would think it would be super cool to have a beanie that would sort of be a nod to the headband that he wears. Maybe. We'll find out. I did my best, okay? I tried. Okay, I do now actually have 2 more small things to show you, but we're gonna have to do a little bit of time travel here because present me hasn't actually finished them yet, but I will have finished them by the time you're seeing this, hopefully, because I need to have them done in time for Christmas, and I'm really hoping that I'm not cutting it that close to the wire. So I will let future me tell you about those now. Meet my forehead. It's we're not at the best day in the wash cycle to be recording, but we're tight on time. The show must go on. So the next thing that I finished knitting this year was a pair of Cityscape Mitts by Tori Yu, which you will have seen the very beginning thoughts of in my winter knitting plans video, and I did indeed get these done. So these are the sort of bonus Christmas present that I made for my boyfriend because he'd requested the next item that we're gonna see that I finished this year. Thankfully I got them both done, and I decided I just wanted to do a little something extra to go with it. Hello, Copper, are you coming to say hi? No, you're running away. So these are the Cityscape gloves, and you may notice they are missing the cable twist. That's kind of like a key design feature on these, but I just really liked the bones of this pattern, but felt like it would be more his style with just the ribbing. So it was very simple to not do those cables. The number of, I think it's a 4-stitch cable, and this is a 2x2 rib. So I just replaced the cable with 2 more knits and 2 more purls and proceeded as normal. And that also really simplified the instructions because a lot of it's like, do this until you reach the cable area and then do this and then do this for the rest of it. And instead, like, I was able to basically just like write altered shorthand versions of the notes because there was no cable thing interrupting it, where it was literally just like, do this for the whole round. So these are really simple from an instructions perspective. They were really simple to work on. Honestly, the hardest part of these was just finding the time to work on them when he couldn't be watching me make them. So like at first I was just working on them in front of him and telling him I was knitting socks because when I was just doing like the arm and like the increases for the thumb gusset, it just looked like the gusset of a pair of socks. And so it was once that kind of no longer felt like a plausible cover story, once it was about to start looking a lot more like mitts, I was like, okay, I need to find a way to work on this when he's not here. And just the last few weeks is just, there's just not been a lot of opportunity for that. We've been really busy the last few weeks, but mostly busy together, like because we're going away. It's a lot of like, okay, we need to see like these people in your family for the holidays and these people in your family for the holidays. And also because we're so busy, let's like make sure we have some scheduled quality time together. And so it's just, we've been here, there, and everywhere, but not like asynchronously in the way that would help me secretly knit. So I started these on November 24th and finished them December 6th. And for that first week or so, after like the first couple of days where I got most of what I could do done in front of him, I was kind of like, okay, I'll just wait until like I get a chance when he's not around. And then after that first week, I was kind of like, okay, that doesn't seem to be happening. I need to find a way to work on these while he's home, and I would love for that to be something other than like, I'm just gonna go lock myself in another room for the next several hours. So instead I was like, do you remember in school once in a while when you'd have like a particularly neurotic teacher and you would have to write a test like with a little like divider thingy around you, like a privacy screen? Maybe a more normal analogy for this is like the way you might like go and like vote in person and have your own little privacy screen. So we rigged up a pillow privacy screen so that I could sit beside him on the couch and we could still be like watching something together, but that I could be working on these and he wouldn't be able to see them. Now, of course, this did mean that he like knew I was working on something secretive, but he knew that I was making him the golf club cover that he requested. So as far as he knows, that's what I was working on the whole time, when in fact I was actually finishing these. So the Cityscape Mitts is a one size pattern for a DK weight yarn, which is exactly what I needed because I was looking to use up the rest of my 100% baby alpaca that I picked up at Manos de la Comunidad. And I really wanted to use that for these because I had one ball left over from my Rivendell. I was trying to figure out what to do with it, and several people were like, that's probably the exact perfect amount for a pair of gloves. And I was like, that would actually be a really cute kind of bonus Christmas knit for him because he's the one who was on that trip with me. So it also has like a souvenir association for him too. So I feel like it worked out perfectly. I used almost all of that yarn that was left. I'm glad that I actually didn't end up playing yarn chicken and having to shorten these because I knew I was going to be close on yardage according to the pattern estimate, but I was totally fine. I had a little bit left over and they're really soft and cozy and warm, and I hope he likes them. I mean, I do know he really likes green. It's a color he wears a lot, so it seemed like a relatively safe pick. Not that I picked it out of nowhere. I did have the yarn, but hopefully he gets some good use out of them. And even if not, they knit up super quick, and it was a nice way to use up the yarn. And effectively cost me $0 because I accounted for all of the cost of the yarn that I got at Manos de la Comunidad for my Rivendell. So $0 project. We like that. Okay, this now brings us to my final project of the year, the aforementioned golf club cover. So this one was kind of self-drafted, kind of semi-pulled from something else. I'll try my best to make this make sense. So here's my masterpiece. Oh my God, isn't it so good? Look at the plaid. Ugh, the pom-pom and the plaid. Oh my God, it's so good. It reminds me of the episode in Gilmore Girls where Rory goes golfing with her grandfather and wears little fez with the pom-pom, which is appropriate because this was in fact in part informed by my Gilmore Girls knitting book. So this is what I kind of partly pulled from, only for, you can see a little bit of it here, the plaid pattern that's used on Rory's private school cowl, this one. So I was like, okay, I want to take this plaid pattern and apply it to my own form of a golf club cover. So basically all that I did is that I measured his club to see how big around it needed to be. And then I knew that I wanted to be knitting this at a DK weight just because of the scrap yarn that I wanted to knit it out of. So I was just looking at projects that I've knit that were at a DK weight and looking at what my gauge was on those. So based off the size of the club and kind of a common range of gauge that I would fall at knitting with a DK weight yarn, I was looking at the plaid pattern. Actually, I had to convert the plaid in that cowl pattern from, it's just like written out in text. So I first converted that to a chart so that I could start like modifying the chart. And really all that I modified is that I made the long section of the plaid, because you see how the different blue sections are different widths. So I made this wide section a little bit less wide. That's the only thing that I changed. And so that ended up being a 22 stitch repeat. So this whole thing is just that times 2. So I did this by casting on 44 stitches. So initially I planned to do this color work using the like double knit method that the cowl uses. So it's like a fully reversible scarf. And I thought it would be a really smart opportunity to use this to like learn that color work technique because I've never done that before. I started trying to do that and quickly was like, oh, this is going to take me like 4 times as long as it would take me to knit it in stranded colorwork, because not only is it double knitting, so it's effectively, you're working twice as many stitches for the number of stitches you need like for the circumference and for the length, because you're knitting 2 separate layers of fabric, but also it's taking longer than just double because in between every single stitch, I'm having to be moving the yarn forwards and backwards. And so it was just like, I don't have time for this. So instead I was like, I'm just gonna work this as stranded. I'm gonna learn how to do double knit color work another time. We don't have time for this. We're not gonna worry about it. And this was a quick one. I needed it to be, so that was good. I started on December 8th and finished it December 11th. So on the 8th, I started by casting on right here and I was working the plaid pattern. So this is just a straight 44 stitches around tube all the way up to almost the very top. And then there's 2 rounds of decreases. So on the first round of decreases, I did a combination of knit 2 togethers and the center double decrease that I learned from my Rivendell, where you actually have like 2 stitches on either side of a center stitch, both slanting in and disappearing behind that center stitch, so it's symmetrical. So basically what I was trying to do was stay in pattern as far as the colors. So like on a column where it's 3 stitches wide, I would do a center double decrease on that. And on one that was 2 stitches wide, I would do a knit 2 together. Anything that was 1 stitch, I didn't decrease that. I just left it as a single. And so I just kind of applied that logic all the way around. And then I did a second round of decreases right after that, where I basically applied the same logic, but because of the decreases that had already happened, I think they were all knit 2 togethers at that point. I don't think there were any 3s left. There was maybe 1 on like the wide section. And then after that, I just cut my yarn and kind of fished the tail through all of the stitches that were left in that top row and then pulled to cinch-a-chet and kind of like knotted it on the inside and then wove in the ends. That was how I did the decreases at the top to have it taper in. And then I picked up around the bottom to do the ribbing, which I did at a rate of 2 stitches picked up for every 3. And I just did that as a 1x1 rib on, did I downsize my needles? I don't think I actually did. And then I finished it with the super stretchy bind off, which I knew that I needed to practically because like I did want this to taper down at the bottom so that it would like sit a little bit more snug to the golf club, but also like it needed to still be able to get over the large head of the golf club. So I did that and I was actually pleasantly surprised. I feel like sometimes the super stretchy bind off kind of flares out, but on this one it did a pretty good job of not being too flary. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then for the pom-pom, I just did this the like easiest way possible, where you just wrap the yarn around your hand and then like tie the little bow and snip the edges. I didn't bother with any sort of cardboard template or anything like that. I just used my hand and then basically gave it a little haircut to try to even it out a little bit, but I feel like it came out really nicely, and I did not feel like messing with any sort of cardboard template thing. So very happy with that. And yeah, I think it's super cute. I just really love the plaid. I think it's so fun. I also love that this was entirely a scrappy project. So to show you what I made this out of, this is the leftovers of my Shelterwood Fiber Co. Romney DK that I used in my Serendipity. This is their dark brown color. And I also used some leftover Knitting for Olive merino in the colorway Blue Tit. This was from my classic rib, so I held this double to match the DK weight. And then I used some leftover Cascade 220. This is the Super Rush Merino in black. This is not a DK. I think this is actually a worsted. This is definitely thicker than the other yarns that I was working with, but it was close enough that I figured it would be fine, and I think it's totally fine. I did, when I was doing this in managing my yarns for my color work, I did work the black to be the less dominant color, which I think maybe helped it from kind of like taking over too much as it's a little bit chunkier. But I'm really happy with how this came out. It feels like a fun, scrappy, scrappy in terms of you use scrap yarn, but also just scrappy. Like I feel scrappy for having come up with this and put it together. So we got it done. I am super happy with how this turned out. I think it's really cute. I tested it on his club. It fits. Success. All right, that is all 10 knits that I completed in 2025. And would it be a channel where we talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it's costing me if I didn't add up what all of this cost me? So let's look at our grand total for 2025. I hadn't been actively keeping track of this number all year, but obviously just from like knowing what individual projects cost and having like a vague sense over time, I was pretty sure that we were over what I had spent on projects last year. Yeah, so last year, my grand total that I spent on all of my knits, which you can see in more detail if you want to go back and watch my everything I knit in 2024, that total was $818 Canadian for the whole year. This year's total, are we ready? $1,681 Canadian. Ooh, okay. So we've doubled from last year, which I remember saying something last year that is a little bit funny now. Are you ready? So hey, our costs are coming down over time. Good for me. Yeah. Okay, so how do we feel about this? What happened here? Why did this happen? So I think there's a few different things going on. Number one is you may have noticed as I was going through the yarns that I was using for each project, there were a lot of indie dyed yarns this year. That was not really something that I was using before this year. It was extremely rare cases. This year it became way more common. And I think part of that is just that I have been knitting for a few years now. And part of that means that like of the commercial yarns that I have found that I've liked, I've kind of worked my way through all of their colorways that I like, and I was just kind of finding it getting harder and harder to find yarn colors that I was excited about. And I had felt even last year, like, why do people buy indie dye solids? Like, I just don't get it. Like, it's so much more expensive and it's just a solid color, just like any commercial dye. And now here I am absolutely eating my words, because I know now that indie dyers, because they're operating in small batches, can often get away with producing colors that are a little less mass appeal, a little more unusual and off the beaten path, because they just don't need to find as many people to sell them to for a batch to have been worth it, because it's a smaller batch, right? So I have just found that you can often find really gorgeous, fun, interesting, nuanced colors in indie dye that are really hard to find in commercial yarn. And so that's part of it. And part of it is also the fact that, okay, just because I like indie dye yarn doesn't mean that it suddenly becomes more affordable. But what made it more affordable this year is this YouTube channel by a wide margin. So at the beginning of this year, I made a video about how much money my YouTube channel had made after its first year. And in that video, it was a pretty nominal amount for the amount of time that goes into the channel. Like, I think it was less than $2,000 for the whole year. I calculated out my hourly rate. It was far worse than a minimum wage. Like, it was not making really significant income. It was enough though to offset my yarn costs for the year and then some, which was exciting. Over the course of this year though, the channel's revenue has really started to trend upward, and I will get into this in more detail in a video once my channel hits its 2nd anniversary. I'm going to do a follow-up on that, how much the channel has earned me this year, but you'll see when that happens that it really has been a significant increase from the first year, which has just made it a lot easier to justify spending a little bit more money on yarn because it's kind of paying for itself. There's also the related factor that yarn is now a business expense for me, which is very funny. But also like that doesn't make it free, but that does offset about 25% of the price tag, because money that I spend on yarn doesn't count as taxable revenue. Like I save the income tax on that amount of money. So in multiple tangible ways, the channel has made it much easier for me to sink more money into my yarn. So it's very much a different yarn buying proposition than the one that I was facing before I started my YouTube channel, or even a year ago when I had my channel, but it was bringing in very little money. So like, do I recommend starting a channel just to pay for your yarn? No, it's way too much work just for that. Like, you will never get past that first while until you start making enough money that it actually becomes a good hourly rate. You'll never get past that part if you're not actually in it for the fun of making the videos. But if you do think you would actually enjoy making the videos, it's not a bad strategy. So that's all I've got to tell you about everything that I knit this year. If you've got some downtime over the holidays and you're feeling like you could do with a little visit from the Ghost of Knitting past, you can check out my Everything I Knit in 2024, or if you want to go back even further, you can do the Everything I Ever Knit, which was one of the very first videos that I ever posted to my channel. If you prefer the Ghost of Knitting Future, you can check out my winter knitting plans if you haven't already seen those, and the Ghost of Knitting Present is almost done haunting you right now. She would just like to know, what's your favorite thing you knit this year? Let me know. And thank you so much for coming to knit with me today. If you'd like to be here next time, I hope you'll consider subscribing if you haven't already. But if you already have, you're my favorite. And I'll see you next time. Bye.